Government statistics in Manitoba indicate that human activity is the primary cause of the vast majority of wildfires this year.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford praised the meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney and other premiers in Saskatoon, calling it the most productive interprovincial gathering in a decade, and even went so far as to compare Carney to, quote, Santa Claus.
The Liberal minority government narrowly lost a House of Commons vote on a Conservative amendment demanding an economic update before summer adjournment. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, June 4th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Noah Jarvis.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. The overwhelming majority of wildfires in Manitoba have been started by people, according to provincial government data. As the wildfires in Manitoba continue to rage across the province, the Fire Situation Report from Manitoba's Natural Resource Department found that 99 of the past 109 fires reported this year were human-caused. Only 5 fires were natural-caused, while another 5 remain under investigation. The Alberta government announced similar findings last year after nearly all of the province's wildfires in 2024 were human-caused. Thousands have been evacuated across Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where officials have declared a state of emergency as dozens of out-of-control wildfires rage on. Hundreds of residents have had to flee their homes in northern Manitoba over the weekend as communities were threatened by smoke. Nearly 600 people from Cranberry Portage were evacuated and are expected to be removed from their homes for the next several days. Around 17,000 Manitobans have had to leave their homes since the fires began last month. Pamichi-Kamak Cree Nation was also evacuated last week with multiple flights departing for Winnipeg. Emergency centers across the province have been opened, including as far south as Winkler, Manitoba, located only 20 kilometers from the U.S. border. So, Noah, has the frequency of legacy media and politicians attributing wildfires to climate change matched or exceeded that of previous years?
I don't think the current coverage has matched what it has been in the past. I think legacy media has really attempted to pivot and move on from the issue, a bit surprising. And I think that's because of a few reasons. First of all, when Prime Minister Trudeau got elected in 2015, the environmental question was a big issue, and he put it as a first and foremost issue for his government, championing emissions caps, championing the tanker ban, championing Bill C-69, and of course the carbon tax. And I think that now that we have someone like Mark Carney in power, who is, promising to reduce the consumer carbon tax to zero and actually repeal that legislation, promising to build energy infrastructure and specifically a pipeline, and that he's willing to get rid of some of the Trudeau government's approach it to resource development. I think that the legacy media, still being supporters of the Liberal Party, have decided to focus on other issues, decided to focus more closely on the need to develop our resources because of the threat of the United States that Donald Trump really presents. So it still satisfies the sort of left-wing, right-wing dynamic that the legacy media tries to establish, them being the defenders of democracy and of the left, and really trying to report against the right, that being Donald Trump. They have really refocused their message away from the climate change issue. And now that we have more and more evidence that these wildfires have been human caused, 95% of the wildfires in Manitoba were human caused, not caused by natural causes. I think that really dispels a lot of the narrative that the climate change activists have been talking about. And one of the big ways to avoid having these wildfires is to make sure that people are better informed in how to prevent wildfires from happening. Don't smoke cigarettes in the forest and then drop your lit cigarette butt in somewhere where that's possibly flammable. You don't want to be lighting up fires that could go out of control, and it's incumbent on the provinces and the federal government too to manage these forests to ensure that dead wood, dry wood that is just lying in the forest is cleaned up so that these types of very flammable types of wood don't cause these fires simultaneously just because it's a bit of a hot day and the wood decides to catch fire. So I think that there's a lot that can be done to prevent these wildfires, and you don't necessarily need to attribute it to climate change because honestly, much of it is because humans do stupid things. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was overjoyed after he met with Prime Minister Mark Carney and his fellow premiers in Saskatoon on Monday, calling the encounter the best in the last decade. As chair of Canada's premiers, Ford went as far as comparing Carney to Santa Claus, bearing gifts. Ford said, quote, "This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. We all walked out of that room united. That's the most important thing. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole." The meeting was marked by unusual consensus among the premiers and the federal government as Carney outlined a new 2-year timeline for approving nation building projects under a streamlined federal process. The plan includes eliminating internal trade barriers and forming Indigenous equity partnerships. Ford similarly positioned the meeting as a push against Trump. Premier Scott Moe and Danielle Smith also expressed cautious optimism. Smith said she was, quote, "encouraged by the immediate change of tone," noting Carney's new willingness to support oil development and recognize Canada's energy potential. Smith's newfound cautious optimism comes the day after warning Carney of the risk of losing 14 trillion in wealth due to anti-oil laws. Going into the meeting, Smith reiterated her priorities for Carney, which included working with Alberta to build a pipeline to the BC coast, repealing the emissions cap, Bill C-69, the tanker ban, and the net zero electricity regulations by 2035. Although at the First Minister's meeting final press conference, Smith said that her province was aiming to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, a goal which is possible through technological advancement without artificially capping energy production. So, Isaac, it looks like the main message that is coming from this premier's meeting is that there is consensus and agreement and unity amongst these premiers, but all that unity and good feeling doesn't really matter much if no tangible results and agreements and deals are being reached at these meetings. So, regarding the recent meeting between the premiers and the prime minister, what agreements or deals were reached?
Yeah, Noah, like you said, the main thing that came out of the meeting was Carney outlined a 2-year timeline for approving nation building infrastructure projects and committed to streamlining federal processes. But importantly, no binding legislation came out of the meeting. The premier seemed, however, generally more united than they had been in the past, as you mentioned, with even cautious optimism coming from leaders like Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe out of the Western provinces. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford also highlighted the strategic importance of new energy and resource projects, pointing to oil pipelines and the Ring of Fire as key areas of growth. He described the meeting as a turning point in countering economic threats from the United States, specifically taking a very anti-Trump stance. He went as far, Ford did, as saying, quote, "President Trump has declared an economic war on every single business, every single person in this country. We're going to unleash our strengths." While Ford celebrated Carney, as you mentioned, calling him Santa Claus, he did celebrate as well the new approach from Carney, which he said signals a shift away from overregulation and high taxation that has obviously previously hindered the government, specifically under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Ford said, quote, "If we continue putting red tape and regulations and high taxes, guess what? No one is going to come and invest." Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe also said the meeting showed an unusual degree of federal-provincial alignment. He said, quote, "Today was a very positive meeting. I hope that Canadians would feel very positive with their provincial, territorial, and federal leaders coming out of here today in agreement." However, again, this was mostly just discussing what could happen, and no legislation has yet to come forward, so we'll have to wait and see what really occurs from a legislative standpoint. The minority Liberals suffered a significant defeat in the House of Commons after a Conservative motion to amend the throne speech narrowly passed. The motion, sponsored by interim leader of the opposition Conservative MP Andrew Scheer, passed by a vote of 166 to 164, with support from all opposition parties. All Liberal MPs voted against it, but 4 government members were absent due to paired votes, allowing the amendment to pass. The amendment calls on the government to present an economic update or budget before the House adjourns for the summer that includes, quote, full accountability of Canada's finances while respecting provincial jurisdictions and Indigenous peoples. The final text was the result of negotiations that incorporated a Bloc Québécois sub-amendment on provincial autonomy and an earlier amendment addressing Indigenous considerations. Initially, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne had previously stated that there would be no budget this year, with the government instead aiming for a fall economic statement. Prime Minister Mark Carney later revised the government's position and pledged a budget in the fall. Government sources have indicated that the motion is non-binding, noting that House motions express the will of Parliament but do not carry the force of law. The vote marks an early test for Carney's government, which won a minority mandate in April. While the Liberals are not legally obligated to table a spring budget, the opposition now holds a symbolic victory in forcing the issue onto the government's agenda. So, Noah, have the Liberals indicated they plan on respecting the vote and tabling an update this spring?
Well, for those who wanted the Liberals to table a budget before June 20th, it does not look like that'll be happening. The thing with these motions is that they don't carry the weight of law, meaning that the government is under no obligation to table a budget because this is just a motion. It's just a declaration of Parliament's will. It doesn't actually force the government to table a budget before June 20th. So we had Mark Garrettson, the whip of the Liberal Party. He came out and he told the media that this is just a motion that the Liberals don't really have to take too seriously. But I think that Mark Harrison might actually be, in a bit of trouble because there was four Liberals who abstained. Just weren't able to make the vote, and the Liberals they lost the vote by 2 votes. So if they had all of their MPs voting against the motion, it actually would have failed. But nonetheless, the Liberals said that they were going to table a full budget in the fall when Parliament returns from its summer break. Let's see if Mark Carney is able to stick to that promise and table a budget. It's not like it's going to take that long for Finance Canada to generate the numbers necessary to put in a budget, but it is all the extra padding that the government usually puts around the budget, the flowery language about the new programs that they're introducing and trying to couch all this government spending as actually beneficial for the Canadian people, even if it is driving the country further into debt and driving price inflation. So it remains to be seen whether or not the Carney government will stick to their commitment to table a fall budget. But no, it does not look like the Liberals will be tabling a budget before June 20th. And if they do, color me and I think the entire nation surprised.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.